Despite the fact that most Pokemon are multicolored and use shading and light to make them look more realistic, the Pokédex insists that they have a single color and lets you filter by that color. I don't want to get into a debate here about whether Pokemon are in the correct color category when it is ambiguous in some cases. Should Scrafty be yellow or red, I cannot say. But I did wonder whether color was a good predictor of type. There are two ways we could ask this question. Are most red Pokemon fire types, or the other way around? Are most fire type Pokemon red? To answer each question, we first need to think about color and the Pokédex classification system a little bit more. The Pokédex lists 10 possible colors that Pokemon can be: red, blue, yellow, green, black, brown, purple, grey, white, and pink. There are more types than there are colors, so for some types they may have more than one expected correlation. I think this makes sense, since as most Pokemon are not a single type, it makes sense that they wouldn't fit into just a single color either. For example, there are a lot of normal flying types, which may mean that normal could easily be in brown for the sparrow-looking birds, or pink for all the cute little puffball-looking Pokemon like Jigglypuff and Happiny. The other thing to factor in here is that the color system of the Pokédex is bad. It's just straight up not good at picking a color for Pokemon to be, and that's going to skew how this whole dataset correlates type. Bronzor is green, Starly is brown, and so are its evolutions. Gothitelle is purple, Masquerain is blue. These controversial entries are the natural byproduct of trying to fit every Pokemon into one of 10 color categories. But I figured it would be good to acknowledge up front that how the Pokédex characterizes Pokemon into color groups is bad. Whatever methodology they used for this, it wasn't looking at the Pokemon and seeing what color it mostly is. Since there isn't a color per type, I'll only look at a few to get a general sense of how this might work. First though, I had to consider my dataset. No spreadsheet version of this kind of data existed that I could easily find, so I had to make my own. This was incredibly tedious, but because I wanted to see it, I persevered. And because I'm a community-minded person, the spreadsheet is linked in the description box below. It has data for each color with the types that I thought would greatest correlate with them in each case. So type isn't listed for every Pokemon, only for the Pokemon of the type that I wanted to check against that color. I've tidied it up a bit so that each Pokemon only appears in a color category once to avoid dealing with things like Vivillon and Alcremie. A note on method. Since I'm not a statistician and not really very good with numbers at all, I decided to keep my reasoning and method relatively simple. If a majority of Pokemon in a given color category are a single type, then it's more likely than not that that color is a good indicator of Pokemon being that type. Very simple, not complicated, and easy to test. I'd also like to make a quick note, because I know this will come up somehow, that there can be no causality here. The only reason a Pokemon is either a certain type or a certain color is because Game Freak decided it would be. Pikachu being yellow does not make it electric type, nor would it being electric type make it yellow. That's not how this works. To come right out and say it, color does not indicate type very well, and you would not have good luck guessing what type a Pokemon is based on its color. Let's start with red and fire types. Fire in real life ranges through quite a few colors, from red, orange and yellow to blue, white and green, but we typically imagine fire types spouting orangey red flames, and we have most move animations to thank for this. But of all the Pokemon officially categorized as red, only a third are actually fire types. The rest are a mishmash of every other type, and fire types only represent a plurality of all red Pokemon. Looking at it the other way, just under half of fire types are categorized as red. There are 97 fire type Pokemon and 42 of them are red. This is because a large number of fire types, perhaps due to the lack of an orange category, are characterized as brown. So on neither question can we say that red Pokemon are mostly fire types or that fire types are mostly red. On to the next example. Blue Pokemon. Just under half of them are water types. Water is the most common type with 176 Pokemon, and blue is the most common color of Pokemon with 186, but this is not a neatly overlapping group. 86 water types are classified as blue, meaning it is just shy of a majority. So again, if you see a blue Pokemon that you don't recognize, it is not a safe assumption that it is a water type, and you should not automatically click Thunderbolt. After looking at the first two colors, I was starting to expect a common result across the rest, that most would be shy of a majority of that type, and less so where the colors get more ambiguous, like grey, brown, and white. And I was mostly correct, but not without being surprised by most green Pokemon being grass type. There are 134 Pokemon classified as green by the Pokedex, and 70 of those are grass types, meaning that a slight majority of green Pokemon are in fact grass types. On the other way to ask the question, most grass Pokemon are not green, as there are 146 grass types, but only 70 of them being green. So, a mixed result, but it is still more likely that a green Pokemon would be grass type than not. On the ambiguous colours, grey, brown and white, the near majorities of red and blue and the majority of green fade away into something more murky. There are 154 Pokemon listed as brown, with normal types comprising a plurality of them at 43, but that's not even a third. Amongst the brown Pokemon, 26 are ground types, mixing the pool further. Normal types aren't majority brown either, since there's 43 brown normal types, but 153 normal Pokemon. So a Pokemon being brown isn't even a mildly good predictor of what type it might be. For white, it's much the same. There are 105 white Pokemon, of which 16 are normal types and 18 are ice types, meaning neither are even a fifth of the total white Pokemon. Granted, this is also where I think some of the worst colour mischaracterizations are. Dialga is white, despite most of its body being dark blue. Frillish is white, despite its whole design choice being that the males are blue and the females are pink. Really not sure why they decided to split the difference and just say that both are white, but nevertheless. If you are trying to guess what type a white Pokemon is, a random number generator with 18 outcomes is probably your best option. Or at the very least, a better option than thinking that something that is white will be ice or normal type. Grey Pokemon aren't much better, with 25 of the 111 grey Pokemon being steel type. There's a minor contingent here of fighting types at 11, but that's really nothing at 10% of the total. Of the black Pokemon, just over 20% are dark types, which is nothing to write home about. Just over a third of yellow Pokemon are electric types, and the same for fairy types in the pink category. I think based on these mega results, I feel comfortable saying that a Pokemon's colour is not a good indicator of its type, and you should not try to attack Pokemon that you do not recognise on that basis. There are a few more things here worth discussing though, I think. First, and possibly most obvious, colour is not the only or most obvious design choice that may indicate type. If something is spouting flames, it doesn't matter what colour it is, it's probably fire type. If it has wings, you may feel pretty comfortable guessing that it is a flying type, though you absolutely could be wrong. If it looks kind of evil but also slightly mischievous, most people wouldn't second guess whether it is dark or ghost type. If you encounter a Pokemon you've never seen before when playing a game for the first time and you don't know how to attack, proceed based on prominent design features and not colour. Some general reasoning that contextualizes these outcomes. Some types and colours are just more common than others. Water types are by far the most common type, and therefore it should not be surprising that blue Pokemon would also be relatively common. The same goes for normal types and Pokemon categorized as brown. Lastly, I think it's interesting that this is one area with a departure from regular real-world biology. The colour of plants and insects, generally speaking, can tell us quite a bit about what they are, whether we should eat them or avoid them, and how they do the things they do. Plants that produce chlorophyll are green because, well, the chlorophyll. Animals and insects with lethal venoms or poisons are often vividly coloured as a base indicator to any predators to say, "Try and eat me, see what happens." While grass types might generally be green, and some poison types also have bright colour schemes, the rest of it doesn't necessarily follow. Fish really aren't automatically blue, so Pokemon doesn't need to keep making blue water types. Well, there you have it. Colour does not predict type very well in Pokemon, and Pokemon's colour classification system is deeply flawed. Is there something that I missed? Are you a statistician of any kind and quite reasonably offended by my caveman level analysis? Let me know in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching.